What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to do something a little bit different. There's been a handful of movies that I have watched in the time that I've had a YouTube channel about movies and have not covered them here on the channel. More often than not, most movies that I watch, new and old, I will cover on the channel at some point. And every here and there's been a couple that I've watched and they just kind of slipped through the cracks and I never made a video. So I wanted to kind of go back and fix some of those mistakes. And so today we're going to be talking about one of those movies, and that movie is Tomorrowland. Directed by Brad Bird and starring people like George Clooney, Hugh, Laurie, Britt, Robertson, and Raffi Cassidy, Tomorrowland is, well, based on the theme park expansion locations in Disneyland and Walt Disney World known as Tomorrowland. And before we get too far into it, clearly we have a guest here in this video, and that is my buddy Rob of the Big Rob Theory. How's it going, my friend?
Hey guys, how are you? Sorry, I had to.
You really did that, didn't you? Yeah. Get ready for the zoom-ins. Get ready for the zoom-ins, people. All right, so we're going to be talking about Tomorrowland. It's going to be a little bit more laid back. We're just going to kind of talk about it. So this is a movie that I saw maybe a year or so after it originally came out. I remember that my buddy Thomas and I were actually hyped for this movie. It's a friend of Robert's as well. We saw the trailer back when I was living in South Florida. We were really excited for it, and then we never went to see it in theaters at all. And then I heard that it wasn't all that great, and I eventually ended up getting a Blu-ray for it, ended up seeing it then, and I remember enjoying it, but I wasn't as into it as I was hoping as I would be. But it's been a few years since that watch, and Rob had never seen it, so I decided, hey, why not revisit the film now? First time watch for Rob, second watch for me. Before I get into my thoughts on rewatch, what did you think, Rob?
So the first time watching it, I actually had a good time with it. There were some dynamics that I found quite odd. Very, very, very odd. But it didn't really take me out of the movie too much. It's just, I wish that there were just certain things that were done a little bit differently, and they would have alluded to things that, because obviously there's certain dynamics of romance in this movie, and that's okay, but it's just with the two people that they chose to do it with, which we'll get into later on. I don't know, it just made for a weird feeling in the movie. Like while I'm watching it, I'm like enjoying it, but at the same time, you know, when you are watching something and then you have two different sides of your mind, like thinking about the same thing but just differently. That's exactly what was going on here. So once we dive more into it, then I can expand on it more. But yeah, it was a good movie. It was a good time. I love the premise. I love the premise because as a kid, this is something that low-key, as a nerd, I have to say I wish kind of happened to me. But it's fine. It's all good.
Right. So, like, as far as the premise, and this is going to be a bit more of a spoiler discussion. We're not going to do every little breakdown of everything that happened, but we are going to talk kind of freely about the movie. And so the base premise of the movie is when it opens, we're introduced to George Clooney and Britt Robertson's character as they're kind of giving a bit of a backstory to catch us up to where we are at the point of the very beginning of the movie. And so it takes us back first to George Clooney's character's childhood, where we see that he's an inventor, he's very, creative, and is trying to create a jetpack. And in doing so, he ends up grabbing the attention of these two individuals that end up bringing him to this world called Tomorrowland, a place where they take the world's brightest people. It's like a special, like almost alternate dimension where it's like this futuristic world, and there's all these people that don't have anything like government or health issues getting in the way of their ability to create and innovate. And so this young boy, iteration of George Clooney, ends up going to this world, getting invested in this world. Something ends up going wrong that ends up having him leave Tomorrowland at some point. And then that's when we're introduced to Britt Robinson's character, who is similarly kind of creative and inventive, and now is kind of being brought into Tomorrowland to save Tomorrowland and to save the world. So Tomorrowland is this alternate dimension for incredibly intelligent and creative individuals. And they kind of have a bit of a key for you to have to be able to get in. Not just anybody can go there. George Clooney's character has a lot of resentment for this world now because he was initially kicked out. He was let in, then he was kicked out, and now he's working with Britt Robertson's character to get back into Tomorrowland and help save the day, but he's a little bit reluctant at first. And amidst the way, there's some other things, some other characters, some android characters, but that's the basic gist. So I like the idea of a different universe that has like this place for intelligently creative people, and I like the idea that they get so full of themselves that eventually they realize that they've kind of lost sight of what this world should have been. So kind of like what Rob said, I think the premise is really clever. Now, Robert mentioned an interesting dynamic, and that is specifically around George Clooney's kid's version of his character and a character named Athena, who is an android. But when the movie opens, we're not introduced to the fact that she is an android yet. So she's just a little girl who is meant to go out there and try to discover intelligent people, or at least this android is disguised to look like a little girl. So George Clooney's younger version in this movie starts to kind of fall for Athena, and then we jump to the future where Athena is now with Britt Robertson's character, and she's trying to recruit back this character Frank Walker, played by George Clooney, but he's much older now. And so here you have this dynamic where you have George Clooney, who was heartbroken as a kid by this android who stays looking like a little girl. And so when he sees her all these years later, he's still kind of butthurt about it, but he's butthurt towards this little girl looking android. And there are a couple of moments in the performances, in their eyes and stuff, that they're still playing off the idea that there was some sort of romance there that ultimately is just kind of weird, because you have George Clooney and this little girl robot who's supposed to be way older, and the young girl does play her pretty well, to feel like an older woman, but she's still a little girl. So you want to elaborate a little bit further on that?
Yeah, because I was just sitting here, we were watching it, and I kept saying like subtle comments to him, like, man, this is just really weird. I can't get into that whole dynamic, because the acting was pretty, honestly, very, very, very spot on. The acting was really well done, especially by Raffi Cassidy. She was just really good, and she did a good job playing an older individual. And I like that premise, and it's actually a pretty good one, making this character an android, and you don't really find out until like later on in the movie, oh, she was an android. That makes sense why she still looks the same. But if they would have just made it to where, I don't know, they just aged her up, like they enhanced her a little bit, aged her up a little bit, or transferred her consciousness to a different body that might have looked similar to her but was older, then okay, that would have been perfect. That honestly would have been way better for me. But I also get the idea behind it, like, okay, they created these androids to go out and find dreamers, and that's great. I love that. It's just, man, the way how they acted together, and that he said it, you could see it in their eyes, like just a lot can be told by people's eyes. So the way how they kept giving each other certain looks, it was like at first you're like,
right, like they give weird. Good performances, like George Clooney, Raffi Cassidy, who plays the young girl android character. They give good performances, and when you're watching the sequences in the early part of the movie that have the young Frank Walker, the young George Clooney character, with Athena, this young-looking android character, it's great, because when they have those cutesy moments, it works, and so you see this kid Frank Walker, who's not only enamored with the world of Tomorrowland, but he's enamored with this young girl. And so, like he said, it isn't until a little bit later in the film that we learn that she is an android or robot that doesn't age. And so you do have those moments later on where, Frank Walker is literally telling her, like, well, you left me behind, and there's this resentment. But then there's moments where they look at each other in their eyes, and at the end, Athena ends up sacrificing herself because of her self-destructive, capabilities in order to destroy a machine. And so they have this final moment where George Clooney's holding her, and I would give credit to the actors because they do make it convincing that this was a real scenario that happened. It's just a strange scenario, like, why have this young girl android be this love interest to this character when he was younger, that's now older and hasn't seen her since he was a kid. So of course he's going to see her and instantly kind of remember what he felt like as a kid. I think that's something that's human that we can all relate to. It's just a weird visual. So we had to spend a little time talking about that here, because I think there's no way to get around it other than the fact that it's just a strange creative choice in the movie, even if I understand what they were going for. Yeah. Any final thoughts on that part of the movie?
It's still good. It's just, as he said it's just a strange dynamic. I just personally wish that, or I personally would have loved to see that they maybe added some enhancements to her and made her older, aged her up a little bit. Look at Frank Walker. He's like, what would you say, maybe in his 40s?
Maybe
50s. And there's this girl who looks like she's 12. Like, come on, It's a little weird. Like
It's
a weird,
strange.
weird, interesting writing choice. But the movie was still good. I can't really get over that, man. It's just because I love the way how the relationship is. I do like the idea behind the relationship.
Right.
You met this person, they barely aged at all. You know, I would have taken it more if like she aged a little bit, got a little older. It barely aged at all, and then you finally see her again, and you're like, yo, how could you do this to me? You know, it just you have the same emotions.
Right.
So
I think the movie that handled that the best. Have you ever seen The Curious Case of Benjamin Button?
No.
All right. So in that movie, the general idea is that Brad Pitt's character is an old man at birth. So he's a baby who is super old. And as he ages, when he's really young, he's super old, like decrepit. And when he gets middle-aged in the movie, he ends up meeting Cate Blanchett's character when they're about the same age. And they end up falling in love. But the older she gets, the younger he gets. And by the time he dies, he becomes a baby again, like an actual like newborn baby. So it's like reversed aging. But the premise is cool. So he starts getting younger, and as she's getting older, she has this person she's in love with who's turning back into a toddler and stuff like that. So she cares for him in a different way. But it happens on a slow progression, and it's like a kind of a heartbreaking story where you can at least buy into that a little bit more. Yeah. Whereas with this, it's just kind of like sudden, and now you have these scenes where they're on an adventure, and you got this young little girl, and you got George Clooney looking at this little girl with these eyes that are just giving way too much. They're just saying way more than they should.
And you can feel the tension too, like at the first meeting with all three of them. Even the character, what's her name? Britt Robertson's character.
Yeah, Casey. Yeah.
You can just see even on her face, like she's in the middle and she's like, what's going
right.
on here? Like what's going?
Right.
It's just yeah. It's
well,
just
speaking on Britt Robertson's character, Casey. So she's the main character of the movie, and she's, you know, what's interesting about her character is that she's not nearly as inventive right out of the gate. Like she knows how to work like mechanics and stuff like that, but she's not building jetpacks and stuff like that. But for some reason, she's the one that Athena comes to get to save Tomorrowland. And by the end of the movie, I just never fully understand what Casey's ingenuity is, like what her creativity is. You know, she does save the day in a lot of ways just by kind of knowing how to do things, but they never fully explain that. As a character, I did enjoy her for the most part. She could be a little bit like, hey, whoa, what's going on, half the movie, but I did enjoy the performance and I enjoyed the character. What did you think about the character of Casey?
I really liked Casey because I mean I can't relate, but I can understand. You know, she's just trying to do her thing, and her dad's like, no. And then she's like, well, why not? And then just going off and trying to have adventures and just finding yourself at that age, you know. There were times, where she did like the whole like, oh my God, you know, and sometimes I'd be like, all right, just take a minute and just take everything in, breathe, and think about the situation. I did enjoy her character. I did. It's just, there were some things too, like just the whole overreaction sometimes got me. I was like, all right, Casey, come on, just relax.
Right.
You know?
At times I felt like that's what her character was kind of built around.
Yeah, the overreactions.
Right. And so, I mean, outside of those elements that maybe didn't work from time to time, some things that were weird. Speaking on the dad is played by Tim McGraw, of course, famous singer, famous country singer. He was pretty good in the movie.
No,
you know,
yeah, it's really good.
It's sometimes weird when singers are in movies. I know that Tim McGraw's been in things before, so I think that's why he was fine in this. But it's always, you know, sometimes you can have a singer or, you know, a music artist that's in a movie and it just turns out to be terrible. But he was pretty solid in the movie. But overall, I enjoy the look and feel of this film. I really enjoyed that opening sequence when we see a young Frank Walker coming to Tomorrowland and he's figuring out his jetpack and he ends up flying through the clouds and you get like the snippets of what Tomorrowland looks like through the clouds. I thought that was really great. Watching it again on a 4K TV, we have like the lights behind the TV that sync up with the colors of the screen. I thought that was pretty cool. Like I really enjoyed seeing that sequence. What did you think of the world and the kind of the sci-fi element of Tomorrowland?
It was beautiful. It was absolutely immaculate. That really was what initially got me into the movie, and that was early on too.
Right.
And I was instantly like, I looked over at him and I'm like, oh my God. And it's just beautiful. It was just beautiful to see, and especially I love my sci-fi movies. We love sci-fi. You know,
Right.
If there's ever, when in doubt, throw on a sci-fi movie and we're in there. You know.
Yeah, sci-fi and fantasy without a doubt are our favorite genres, and so I think that this is a movie that gets a lot of crap, and I do see why in some areas. It has predictability. It has, you know, some weird character things like we were talking about. Some of the characters are kind of meant to just kind of be like whoa, wait, what's happening here? Yeah. And then, somebody's got to sit there and explain to them and the audience what's happening here. But I do think there's a cool premise here. I think there's some fun action too. I think they utilized the robots and the androids to get away with some pretty brutal accidents. There's a scene in the movie where the character Athena, the young girl, gets like run over by a car, but because she's a robot, it happens, but it's kind of brutal. There's another scene where she rips off the head of Catherine Hahn's character, who's an android, and she like decapitates her, but it's because she's got sparks coming out of the bottom. But there's some moments in the movie that I was thinking, oh, okay, like this is a little bit dark at times, It's not like this is no R-rated dark kind of movie.
There's
but
no blood and gore.
Right. But they get away with some of the action being a little bit brutal from time to time. There's also an element of kind of it being a live action cartoon where there's 100 times in this movie where characters should have died. A million, like they should have been just shattered into a million pieces, like the human characters, like their bodies should have been completely blown to bits. But overall, I enjoy this film. I found it to be a good time. I'm glad to have gone and revisited it again. I think if you saw this movie once and you didn't love it, give it another shot. I think that knowing how the movie plays out and just kind of like having lesser expectations for it, just kind of allows it to be a fun ride. Some of the CGI is a bit cartoony, but I do feel like it fits the tone and the look of the film. And overall, it's a film that I do recommend. I think if you're a fan of sci-fi and stuff like that, it's a cool, fun, like lighthearted sci-fi film. This is no Star Wars. This is no Star Trek. This is no like top tier, sci-fi movie. But it's pretty cool. This is no Avatar or anything like that. But I think it's a fun time. Any wrapping thoughts on this one, man?
No, I would say like I don't understand. I haven't seen maybe what you've seen about reviews of the movie and everything. I'm sure that when you say
it has a 50% on Rotten Tomato.
Okay, well, I wouldn't say a 50. I'd give it a little bit more. Maybe not by much, but I'd still
give it like a solid 70%. I don't do scores here on the channel because I don't feel like they're finite, or they are so finite. Like I am always kind of altering my scores for movies in my head. But I'd give it somewhere around like a 70%. It's not like the greatest movie of all time, but I think it's cool. It's got some fun action, some fun visuals.
It was fun.
Right.
It had its funny moments. And yeah, aside from that weird, now that I know about the weird dynamic, going in, I'll just be like, oh, okay, I know what to expect. Right. And I still have a good time with it. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'd watch it again.
Yeah, for sure. Well, a big thanks to you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed just seeing us ramble here together talking about this. We literally just woke up, so if it seems like we just woke up,
you're right.
You're absolutely right, yeah.
You're right.
So yeah, that's going to be our thoughts on Tomorrowland. The Big Rob Theories channel is going to be linked down below in the description box. Go give him some love and let him know I sent you. Anything you want to plug on your channel, my friend?
No, just I've been kind of slacking. Been tired as hell from working at a different place, but I'm going to be releasing my Flash spoiler video because I really want to get that out because I talk about a lot of different things in relation to the animated universe and comics and characters, and I kind of go in, and it's a long video, so I hope you're prepared to sit there for a little bit. And then there's like some new things that I'm going to be doing. I'm actually finally for the first time going to be working on my supercut video, and I've narrowed it down to 3 different songs. So that's going to take me a long time, but I'm going to have fun with that. I've watched this man do so many supercut videos, and it's awesome. Like I love seeing like the passion that he has for it. So it's like inspired me to finally get to doing it. So I'm going to do some of that too. So stay tuned.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. As for my channel, there's always stuff on here. Just go look at whatever was the last thing I uploaded. So I talked about something, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Big thanks to you guys for watching, and we'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.
Catch you later, alligators. No. Why'd you look at me like that, bro? All right, bye, guys.